Every year I convince myself that one pocket passer can break the rules, and every year the floor gives out the second that the touchdowns dry up. Joe Burrow threw 43 last year, and he did it with 0 rushing upside and a touchdown rate that feels unsustainable. So now you're spending a 5th round pick on a guy that needs to be perfect through the air, or you lose. He's going off the board as a QB5 ahead of guys that run for touchdowns who get points without being perfect. And that's what I can't let go of, because Joe Burrow gave us the dream season. Most pass attempts, most yards, most red zone throws for 43 passing touchdowns. That should have made him bulletproof, and still, there were weeks where he killed you in fantasy. Week 1, 8 points. Week 8, QB 23. That's with Jamar Chase, that's with T. Higgins, in a top 2 pass rate offense that gave him everything he needed to be successful. And I'm supposed to believe that he does that again with a 6.6% touchdown rate that screams regression? Because if Burrow's not throwing 3 touchdowns, you're probably disappointed. Just 40 attempts, praying that he finds the end zone. Like, what's supposed to save me if the touchdowns dry up? Because then I'm stuck with 13 points for my QB, who I drafted ahead of getting more depth at my skill positions. You have to take him right next to George Kittle, Alvin Kamara, DJ Moore, guys who could win their position or anchor your entire roster. That idea won't leave me alone if you're wondering how we got here, because if he hits his 43 touchdowns again, you win. But if he doesn't, last year Burrow finished outside the top 15 4 times. QB 29, QB 16, QB 23, QB 18. That's gonna bury you if you draft him in the 5th round. That's a quarter of the season completely gone. And those weren't just fluky weeks, they came right after the monster games. After 5 touchdowns against Baltimore, after he was the QB1 in back-to-back weeks. Then he collapsed, and there was no rushing floor to bail him out. No real margin for error if it was a bad matchup or they stalled out in the red zone one week. Because it's not that he can't go nuclear, it's that he has to. That's what keeps messing with me. You're drafting a guy who needs to be perfect for you to survive. The thing that finally hit me was realizing what other quarterbacks don't need to be. Kyler Murray doesn't need to throw 30 touchdowns. He just needs to stay upright. Bo Nix can miss throws, make mistakes, and still can survive on pace, efficiency, his rushing floor. But Burrow, he has one way to score points. He has to be flawless, not good, not efficient, perfect. And that's when it clicked for me. You're not drafting Joe Burrow for who he is, you're drafting him to repeat the most productive year of his entire career with no safety net on where you have to draft him. The moment he throws 2 touchdowns instead of 3, you probably lose that week, and I just can't shake that. Because this isn't about if Burrow is elite, it's about whether you can survive when he's not. I've taken this swing before, Mahomes in the 3rd, Herbert in the 4th, told myself that they were safe, told myself that I was buying floor or that I needed to build in some sort of stack on my roster. But when the touchdowns didn't hit, they gave me nothing. Correlation goes both ways, my friends. So that's the loop I can't break with Burrow this year, because I want to believe, I want to think that 43 touchdowns means that he's leveled up, that it wasn't just a perfect season in a perfect setup. But if I'm being honest, I've been here before. I'm not letting a quarterback with 0 outs, no legs, no fallout to be the reason that my season ends early. If he falls a few rounds, maybe, but I'm not paying full price just to learn the same lesson again. And just when I thought I'd untangled it, I found myself making the same mistake at a different position. Real quick, if you're serious about actually beating your friends this year, go to fantasyaccelerator.com or hit the first link below. You'll get instant access to my 2025 draft kit, rankings, sleepers, busts, cheat sheets, the same system over 12,000 players used last year to dominate their drafts and steamroll their league. But here's the deal, I'm keeping it limited this year so that the real ones inside actually get my full attention. You'll see on the page how many spots are left, and when it's full, that's it. The price goes up later this month no matter what as well, so now's the time to lock in. Everyone thinks that Jonathan Taylor was the fantasy MVP last year. RB1 in the semis, RB1 in the finals, 5 touchdowns over 2 weeks. Just enough to make you forget how miserable the season really was. Because if you actually drafted him, you probably weren't alive in the playoffs. This year he's going at the 2-3 turn, running back 9 off the board between Bucky Irving and Devon Achane. But he doesn't feel like a swing. He feels like a bit of a consolation prize given what's around him. I mean, I get why people take him there after what he did in the fantasy playoffs. That's mostly what everyone remembers. But the reality is he was the league-winning player that you probably didn't even get to use. But that's exactly what's messing with me, because if you actually followed Jonathan Taylor's season, not just how it ended, it felt like you were walking through landmines, high ankle sprain. Again, Anthony Richardson stealing touchdowns. Again, so I keep staring at this draft slot and I can't tell if we're drafting Jonathan Taylor the player or just the illusion of how last season ended, and that's the part that I can't shake. I keep replaying it. Week 16, 218 yards, 3 touchdowns. He gave us an RB1 week exactly when we needed it in the semifinals. And then he did it again in week 17, 136 yards, 2 more touchdowns. Back-to-back nuclear weeks when it mattered most. And that's what people remember, but if you actually drafted Jonathan Taylor, you remember the part before that, from weeks 4 to weeks 15. He never cleared under 20 fantasy points. Not once. But probably even worse, in the 5 weeks leading up to the fantasy playoffs, he failed to hit double-digit fantasy points 3 times. And he still probably never left your lineup. And that's what wrecked teams. It wasn't just one dud. It was the stretch where every start felt mandatory, but none of them actually gave you a win. The guy had a 98% snap share in week 12, ran 22 routes, and finished with 35 total yards. 0 catches, 3.5 fantasy points. That's the part I just can't let go of, because after everything, he's still getting treated like a safe workhorse. And I get why the numbers feel safe: 4th in rushing, 5th in carries, RB7 in points per game, but they're kind of a trick because 33% of his entire fantasy production came after most rosters were already eliminated. That's not upside, that's us going into draft season in search for some confirmation bias, trying to rewrite a season where those 10 dead weeks didn't matter, that they never happened. But I was there, and I still don't know what I was holding on to. The Colts threw to him 31 times all year. He caught just 18 passes, dropped 5 actually, which was the 3rd highest drop rate in the league, averaging just 1.3 catches per game. And even in that 218-yard game, he didn't see a single target. Not one. And they just drafted DJ Giddens, a pass catching back with 4.4 speed. That doesn't sound like trust. To me, that sounds like a little bit of transition. The thought that keeps rewinding itself is if they didn't see him as a 3-down back, if they hedged after giving him 300 carries, what exactly are we buying here? Because if it's just the name, I've already paid that price once. That's the second it unraveled in my head, realizing how easy it is to forget. I wanted those last 2 games to mean something. 5 touchdowns, back-to-back RB1 finishes. I wanted it to validate the pick this year, to cover the disaster that came before it, because if Jonathan Taylor could do that when it mattered most, then maybe last season wasn't my fault. But that's a lie, because it didn't matter anymore. The Colts had nothing left to protect. By then, their season was already out of reach. That's when they finally let him go nuclear, not because they trusted him, but because they really had nothing at stake. That's the shift that I can't unsee. He didn't carry you to a title. He just gave you 2 highlight weeks to forget how the year really went, and how it really felt, honestly. That's not a league winner. That's more of a fantasy trap. The crazy thing is, if we get more starts from Daniel Jones this year somehow, his ADP actually looks a little bit better. We've at least seen Danny Dimes check the ball down before. Anthony Richardson, that's just not going to happen. So I'm not pretending that I've completely moved on. We're going to have to monitor that QB situation as we get leading into week 1. I'm just afraid of getting stuck again, because those last 2 games really messes with me. And for a player going at the 2-3 turn, that's not a risk, that's a trap. So I think I've finally gotten there. Jonathan Taylor is a big name that you should absolutely not draft this year, not at that price. I'll let someone else relive that loop of paying full price for the name, because once was enough for me. So JT forced his way into your lineup every week, but the next one, he's about to force his way into round 3, and I still don't know how that's possible. But if you're not ready for my full draft kit yet, you can still get my top 150 rankings totally free at top150free.com. It's the exact list that I'm using in every draft this year, and odds are at least one of your league mates already has it. But if they do and you don't, you're gonna feel it by round 3. So grab yours now, it takes 30 seconds, it might save your whole draft. I keep staring at that 13 touchdown season like it explains everything. Not the 1,000 yards, not the 117 targets, just that number. Screaming louder than the rest, because deep down, I know that was the only reason that Terry McLaurin finished as the wide receiver 9. And if I draft him off that again, I'm not betting on Terry, I'm betting that the regression math is wrong. He's going in round 3, pick 33. That's the price of belief that what he did last year wasn't a fluke. Wide receiver 5 finish, 13 touchdowns, career highs across the board, but on only 117 targets, that's not elite volume. Not elite target share, just one thing propping him up: touchdowns. The fantasy footballers dropped this stat that I just can't get out of my head. Love those guys, by the way. There's only been 10 wide receivers over the last 20 years who scored 13 plus touchdowns under 125 targets. None of them, 0, did that again the following year. And McLaurin, he outpaced his expected touchdown total by 5.3 scores, the biggest gap in the entire league. And that's the stat that gets buried, that the wide receiver 5 wasn't sustainable and that it was probably just a spike. And now they add Deebo Samuel, and Jaden Daniels only threw for 3,500 yards, still ran for 800. Washington didn't go pass heavy until Daniels' rib injury cleared, and even then it was only temporary. So what are we actually drafting here? A breakout that's real or a ceiling that's already passed? It's not the finish that keeps messing with me, it's how the case is underneath. Wide receiver 32 in target share, wide receiver 49 in targets per route run. Just 23% of his routes ended in a look. Even in his best year, he wasn't commanding volume like a top option. And the total, just 117 targets, was his lowest since his rookie year. That's not a wide receiver 1. That's someone who just got hot in a system that leaned his way for a few weeks, then shifted again. Because when Daniels was healthy early in the year, they were below average in pass rate. It was only after the injury that they skewed pass heavy, like where they actually started airing it out. And even then, the offense didn't explode. 3,500 passing yards, yards, that's it. That was the ceiling, and that's the ceiling we're chasing now. So yeah, 13 touchdowns for Terry sounds impressive, but 5.3 of them over expectation, that's not dominance. That's the exact kind of spike regression is built to erase. And now that you add Debo into the mix, this isn't just a can McLaurin repeat, it's will he even have the same shot? The moment it clicked is finally realizing that Terry McLaurin caught nearly 45% of Washington's total receiving touchdowns, almost half. That should feel like security that a guy's locked into a role, because the more I sat with it, the more fragile it felt. Touchdown shares that high aren't stable, they snap. And the second it does, there's no floor underneath. The target share isn't elite, the route involvement pretty average, and the QB isn't throwing 4,500 yards. So if the touchdowns fall back to earth, there's nothing left to float as draft cost. That's the exact moment this stopped being complicated, and I just got really honest with myself. Last year wasn't a breakout. It was an illusion, a spike that was masked as a step forward. And that's the trap. He's not just risky, he's the exact type of player that loses you leagues when you chase last year's fire and forget what actually lit it. Look, I know what 13 touchdowns can do to your brain. It's loud, it's sticky, it's the kind of number that makes you forget everything else, the 117 targets, the wide receiver 32 share, the 5 touchdowns that he maybe shouldn't have had. And maybe Jaden Daniels is that good that he did unlock something in Terry. Maybe it wasn't noise, maybe it was just trust. Those are the other sides of it, but here's where I land. If I'm wrong, I miss a spike here. So what? And if I'm right, I dodge the most overpriced bet on the board, because this isn't a quiet sleeper. This is a big name coming off a wide receiver 5 finish, getting drafted in round 3 for one stat, the one that's least likely to repeat, by the way. And I can't make myself do it. I can't ignore 20 years of regression history. I can't chase a role that never matched the finish. I can't bet my season on lightning to strike twice. So yeah, maybe the chemistry is real, but McLaurin at pick 33, that's a name I'm letting someone else take, not because he can't hit again, because when the smoke clears, I just don't want to be left holding the bag.